The notification chime of my smartphone shattered the quiet hum of my office. I'm Sienna, 33 years old, and up until that exact moment, I genuinely believed my brother's upcoming wedding was going to be a moment of family unity. I picked up the glowing device, my eyes scanning the screen. The family group chat titled Maui Matrimony had been buzzing relentlessly for weeks, mostly dominated by my wealthy white future sister-in-law, Brooke. I unlocked the screen and opened the chat. Brooke had just dropped a massive PDF file into the thread. "Hey everyone, just finalizing the travel logistics for my family," her message read, followed by a string of champagne and airplane emojis. "First-class itineraries are officially booked. We secured the Gulfstream suites for my parents, and my cousins are all set for business class. The resort is going to be absolutely perfect." I scrolled through the attached document, my jaw tightening. It was a lavish display of wealth detailing chauffeured airport transfers, private cabanas, and upgraded flight tiers for every single member of her extended family. Brooke never missed an opportunity to remind us that she came from corporate royalty while we were just a hardworking black family from Atlanta. A minute later, another message popped up. This one was from my mother, Evelyn. My heart squeezed as I read her polite, cautious words. "Good morning, Brooke. The itinerary looks beautiful. Thomas and I were just checking our emails, but we haven't received our confirmation codes or flight details yet. Are we traveling on the same airline as your parents? We just want to make sure we pack the right luggage for the baggage limits." I stared at the screen, watching the three little gray dots appear, indicating that Brooke was typing. They bounced for a few seconds, disappeared, and then bounced again. I waited, expecting a simple explanation. Maybe a separate confirmation email was sent. Maybe their tickets were booked through a different travel portal. Then Brooke's reply landed. "Oh, Evelyn. The wedding budget has actually been completely maxed out, covering the VIP guests from my father's company and my side of the family. We had to make some really tough executive decisions about travel logistics. If you and Thomas still want to go to Hawaii, you can always swim there. LOL." I stopped breathing. The air in my office suddenly felt freezing cold. I reread the message 3 times, trying to find some hidden context, some poorly phrased joke, but the blatant disrespect was undeniable. Swim there. LOL. She had just told my mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for her children, that she wasn't worth the price of a plane ticket to her own son's wedding. I watched the chat, waiting for my brother Darius to intervene. The read receipts showed his face icon at the bottom of the screen. He had seen the message. He was online. I waited for him to defend his mother, to correct his fiancée, to say anything at all. Nothing. Total, absolute silence. A hot, suffocating rage began to build in my chest. My hands trembled as I hovered my fingers over the keyboard. I wanted to scream through the screen. I wanted to remind Brooke that while her father was handing her a cushy executive job, my mother was working 3 consecutive janitorial shifts just to keep the lights on. I wanted to remind Darius that my parents took out a devastating second mortgage on their home just to pay off the $80,000 in credit card debt he racked up in college, trying to keep up with his wealthy elite fraternity brothers. Before I could type a single word, another message appeared. It was from Susan, Brooke's mother. "Evelyn, dear," Susan wrote, the condescension practically dripping from the digital text. "Don't feel too bad. These destination weddings can be so overwhelming for people who aren't used to the high society scene. It might honestly be for the best. You and Thomas can just watch the ceremony on FaceTime from the comfort of your living room. It saves you the embarrassment of feeling out of place among our country club friends." My vision actually blurred. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of these women was staggering. They weren't just excluding my parents. They were actively mocking them, hiding their deep-seated prejudices behind passive-aggressive emojis and fake sympathy. They looked at my hardworking, dignified parents and saw nothing but an inconvenience, a social liability that needed to be swept under the rug before the important guests arrived. I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone. My thumb hovered over the backspace key. The urge to unleash a torrent of fury to tear them apart with words was almost unbearable. But then a cold, calculating calm washed over me. Getting angry in a group chat wouldn't change anything. It would only feed into their narrative. It would give Brooke exactly what she wanted: the satisfaction of calling me the angry, dramatic, jealous sister. Brooke and her family operated on the arrogant assumption that they held all the power. They looked at me and saw just another working-class relative they could easily discard. They had no idea what I actually did for a living. They had no idea about the corporate empire I had quietly built from the ground up over the last decade. I breathed, letting the raw emotions settle into a focused, razor-sharp resolve. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to beg for basic human decency. I tapped the screen and typed a single response. Okay, understood. I hit send, locked the screen, and tossed the phone onto my desk. Brooke believed she humiliated my parents, securing her perfect elite wedding without the burden of our presence. She was completely unaware she had just triggered her own absolute destruction. I grabbed my keys and left my corporate office. The drive to my brother Darius's upscale apartment in Midtown took less than 20 minutes. I navigated the busy city streets with mechanical precision, ignoring the honking horns and the suffocating heat of the afternoon sun. I did not spend a single second of that commute crying. I spent it calculating. Darius lived in a luxury high-rise he loved to brag about. Bypassing the desk, I slipped into the elevator. When I reached his penthouse, I did not knock gently. I pounded my fist against the heavy wood with enough force to echo down the pristine hallway. It took him a full minute to answer. The door swung open. Darius stood there in a silk bathrobe holding a glass of bourbon. His annoyed expression immediately morphed into an arrogant smirk. "Sienna," he said, leaning against the doorframe to block my entry. "What are you doing here? If this is about the group chat, you need to calm down and stop being so dramatic." I pushed past him into his sprawling living room. The space was decorated entirely in sterile shades of white and gray, perfectly matching his cold personality. "I am perfectly calm. I want to hear you justify why your future wife just told the woman who gave birth to you to swim the Pacific Ocean to attend your wedding." Darius sighed, closing the door. "You are taking a joke out of context. Brooke is stressed. Her father's corporate partners are attending, and the budget is astronomical. My future in-laws are accustomed to a certain standard of living." "And our parents are not?" I asked. "Are you saying the people who raised you are not good enough to sit in the same room as Brooke's country club friends?" Darius crossed his arms defensively. "You always twist my words. But yes, look at reality, Sienna. Brooke's family summers in Martha's Vineyard. Our parents get uncomfortable ordering wine at a mid-tier steakhouse. They would stick out like sore thumbs in Maui. Brooke is just protecting them from feeling out of place and protecting me from looking like I come from the projects." The sheer self-hatred in his voice made my stomach turn. Standing in his expensive apartment wearing designer clothes, he was fully embracing the racist microaggressions his fiancée hurled at our family, repackaging them as practical boundaries. "Protecting you from the projects." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You grew up in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood in Atlanta. Our parents gave us everything, but you always had to pretend you were richer and more privileged than you actually were." Darius rolled his eyes, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. "I elevated myself. I built a network. You should try it sometime instead of holding on to this bitter working-class pride." "Elevated yourself?" I let out a harsh, echoing laugh that sounded incredibly bitter in the quiet room. "Let us talk about how you elevated yourself. Do Brooke and her elite parents know how you paid for your senior year? Do they know about the $80,000 in credit card debt you racked up buying Rolex watches and VIP tables just to impress your wealthy fraternity brothers?" Darius stiffened, his smirk faltering. "Keep your voice down. That is ancient history and none of your business." "It became my business when Mom took 3 consecutive janitorial shifts to save you from being sued." I fired back. "It became my business when Dad cashed out his retirement and took a second mortgage on his fully paid-off house to keep you out of court. They sacrificed their financial security so you could play a rich kid, and now you tell me they are too embarrassing to attend your wedding." "They did what parents are supposed to do," Darius shouted. "They helped their son succeed. I am marrying into a family with an 8-figure net worth. This wedding is the most important networking event of my life. I cannot have Dad wearing a rented tuxedo and Mom complaining about appetizer prices in front of the CEO of Vanguard Technology. Brooke is right, they would humiliate us." I stared at him, searching his face for any trace of the brother I grew up with. There was absolutely nothing. He had completely sold his soul for a seat at a table that did not even respect him. He looked at the people who gave him life and saw a social liability. "You are a coward, Darius," I said smoothly. "You are so desperate for the approval of racists who look down on you that you are willing to discard your own blood." "I am a winner," Darius sneered. "I am securing my future. You are just mad because you are stuck in the same mediocre lane. You have always been jealous of me. But this is my life now. If you cannot respect the boundaries Brooke and I are setting, then stay out of my life. Stay in your lane and stay away from my wedding." He walked over to the front door and yanked it open. I did not argue or shed a single tear. I adjusted my handbag, walked to the doorway, and stopped right in front of him, committing his arrogant expression to memory. "I will gladly stay in my lane," I said smoothly. "Have a beautiful wedding, Darius." Darius scoffed, rolling his eyes one last time. "Grow up, Sienna." He slammed the heavy door right in my face. The loud click of the deadbolt echoed in the quiet hallway. I stood on the plush carpet for a few seconds, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. Darius believed he had just put his jealous sister in her place. He thought he had successfully defended his perfect, wealthy future. He had absolutely no idea that by slamming that door, he had just permanently sealed his own financial doom. I walked out of the luxury high-rise and got into my car. The engine roared to life, matching the intense rhythm of my pulse. I did not head back to my office or my own home. I drove directly to the working-class neighborhood where I grew up, a place Darius now treated like a dirty secret. My parents lived in the same modest brick house they had owned for 30 years. The lawn was perfectly manicured thanks to my father's meticulous weekend routines, but the porch light was off. The entire house looked unnervingly dark for early evening. I parked my car by the curb and walked up the concrete steps, unlocking the front door with my spare key. The silence inside was heavy and suffocating. I walked past the living room and found my parents in the dining area. The overhead lights were completely turned off. The only illumination came from the street lamp shining through the sheer curtains. My mother Evelyn sat at the head of the worn wooden table, her shoulders hunched forward. My father Thomas stood beside her with a roll of packing tape in his hands. Scattered across the table were fine china plates, expensive crystal glasses, and premium silver flatware. They were carefully wrapping up the lavish wedding gifts they had spent months saving for. My mother looked up as I entered, hastily wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sienna," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We did not hear you come in. We are just putting these things away. We need to return them to the department store tomorrow." I stepped further into the room, staring at the half-sealed cardboard boxes. "You are not returning anything. Why are you packing these away in the dark?" My father sighed, a deep, rattling sound that carried the weight of utter humiliation. He placed the packing tape down and avoided my gaze. "Your brother called us a few minutes ago. He explained the situation with the budget and the travel arrangements. He said Brooke's family is covering the majority of the resort costs, and they had to prioritize the corporate guests. He made some valid points, Sienna. We do not want to be a financial burden on them. Besides, maybe older black folks like us just do not belong at a five-star Hawaiian resort anyway. We would probably just embarrass him in front of those fancy executives." My heart shattered, but I refused to let a single tear fall. Darius had not just excluded them, he had successfully convinced them that they deserved to be excluded. He had weaponized their love for him, making them believe their absence was a necessary sacrifice for his success. "Did he tell you that Brooke told you to swim to Hawaii?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. My mother flinched, looking down at her hands. "Brooke is under a lot of stress with the wedding planning. People say things they do not mean when they are overwhelmed. We have to be understanding. Darius finally has a chance to secure a good future for himself. He is marrying into a powerful family. We cannot jeopardize that by being selfish." Selfish! I grabbed the nearest box of crystal glasses and shoved it aside. "Mom, you worked night shifts cleaning office buildings until your knees gave out just to pay for his fraternity dues. Dad, you drained your retirement so he would not go to prison for credit card fraud. You gave him everything. You are the reason he is even in a position to marry that woman, and he is treating you like garbage." "That is enough, Sienna," my father said sternly, though his voice lacked its usual authority. He is your brother. We protect our own. If staying home protects his new life, then we stay home. I looked at the two people I loved most in the world. They were stripped of their dignity, packaging up their joy in the dark to appease a son who despised them. I felt a cold, mechanical shift in my brain. I was done arguing. I was done trying to make them see his true colors. I reached across the table, grabbed the open box of fine china, and lifted it into the air. "Sienna, what are you doing?" my mother gasped. I walked directly to the heavy-duty trash can in the kitchen and dropped the entire box inside. The loud crash of shattering porcelain echoed through the house. My mother shrieked, and my father rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Have you lost your mind?" my father yelled. "Those cost us thousands of dollars. You do not need to give wedding gifts to people who view you as trash," I stated firmly, turning to face them both. "You are not returning those gifts. You are not begging for a seat at their table. You are going to go upstairs, pull out your largest suitcases, and pack your best vacation clothes." My mother stared at me, bewildered. "Vacation clothes, Sienna? We are not going to Hawaii. Darius made it clear there are no tickets for us." "Darius does not control the sky," I replied smoothly. "You are going to Hawaii. You are going to stay in the most expensive suite on the island. You are going to drink champagne, lay on the beach, and enjoy the vacation you earned. You will pack your bags tonight, and you will be ready to leave for the airport exactly 1 week from today." "We cannot afford that," my father protested, shaking his head. "We do not have the money for a trip like that." "I have the money," I said. "I am handling everything. Do not call Darius. Do not contact Brooke. Pack your bags and leave the rest to me." I turned on my heel and marched out the front door. Sitting inside my car, I called my assistant to mobilize Project Karma. The morning sun glared blindingly off the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office at Apex Compliance and Financial Auditing. Less than 12 hours had passed since I left my parents in their dark dining room, but my mind was entirely focused on the digital files illuminating my massive desktop monitor. Darius and his arrogant fiancée believed I was just some low-level corporate drone struggling to make ends meet in a tiny cubicle. They genuinely thought I was a social and financial liability who would embarrass them in front of their elite network. They had absolutely no idea that I was the founder and chief executive officer of the most ruthless third-party forensic auditing firm in the entire state of Georgia. My executive assistant walked into the room, placing a steaming cup of black coffee on my sleek glass desk. She silently handed me a thick red folder labeled Vanguard Technology before stepping out and closing the heavy mahogany door behind her. Vanguard Technology was a massive multinational tech conglomerate, and conveniently, it was also the exact same company where Brooke held her prestigious title as Vice President of Corporate Events. 2 weeks ago, Vanguard's board of directors had secretly retained my firm to conduct a comprehensive forensic audit of their internal spending. They suspected a significant leak in their quarterly budget, and they hired me to find the source of the bleeding. I took a slow sip of my coffee and opened the main server portal. I typed in my encrypted administrative credentials, bypassing the standard firewalls to gain direct access to the executive expense ledgers. The digital ledger materialized on my screen, displaying thousands of rows of financial transactions. I immediately filtered the search parameters, isolating every single expense report submitted, approved, and authorized by Brooke over the past 8 months. The sheer volume of corporate spending under her direct control was staggering, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. Forensic auditing is not just about finding missing money, it is about finding the story the numbers are trying to hide. I cross-referenced the dates of Darius and Brooke's upcoming Hawaiian wedding with the Vanguard Technology corporate event calendar. The results populated instantly, and a cold smile stretched across my face. According to the official corporate ledger, Brooke was not going to Hawaii for a personal wedding. Instead, she had officially registered a 2-week event titled the Vanguard Pacific Corporate Leadership Summit. I clicked on the master invoice, watching the detailed, itemized receipts flood my screen. Brooke had meticulously routed every single wedding expense through her department's operational budget, burying the personal charges under layers of fake vendor profiles and fabricated corporate initiatives. I pulled up the airfare logistics first. The luxurious first-class Gulfstream suites that Brooke had bragged about in the family group chat were booked entirely on the company dime. She had listed her parents, her cousins, and her country club friends as keynote speakers and essential leadership facilitators for the fictitious summit. The audacity of her theft was breathtaking. I opened the accommodation receipts from the five-star Maui resort. Brooke had reserved 15 premium luxury suites, billing them to Vanguard as executive breakout rooms and corporate hospitality spaces. The exorbitant catering costs, which included imported champagne, caviar stations, and a custom five-tier wedding cake, were listed as team-building networking dinners. She even had the nerve to charge her custom designer wedding dress to the company by categorizing it as high-end promotional wardrobe expenses. Every single detail of her dream wedding, the very same wedding she told my mother she could not afford to invite her to, was entirely funded by stolen corporate money. I felt a surge of righteous vindication pulsing through my veins as I documented every fraudulent line item. I began downloading the digital invoices, compiling a massive portfolio of irrefutable evidence. Brooke had looked down on my parents, treating them like worthless peasants who did not belong in her elite world. She had mocked my mother, a woman who worked tirelessly to earn every honest penny she ever made. Meanwhile, Brooke's entire high society persona was nothing but a fraudulent illusion built on a foundation of white-collar crime. She was not a wealthy heiress paying for a luxurious destination wedding out of her own pocket. She was a common thief wearing a corporate badge, using stolen resources to fund her arrogant lifestyle. I highlighted the final total at the bottom of the master spreadsheet, shaking my head in absolute disbelief at the staggering final number. The comprehensive audit confirmed that Brooke had successfully embezzled exactly $300,000 of company funds to pay for her extravagant Hawaiian wedding. I leaned back in my leather chair, interlacing my fingers as I stared at the damning evidence glowing on my monitor. The trap was now fully set, and the prey was completely oblivious. Brooke and Darius thought they had won. They thought they had successfully excluded the embarrassing poor side of the family from their perfect day. They assumed that their actions would carry no consequences, and that they could simply walk away without looking back at the wreckage they left behind. They had no idea that I held the power to destroy her career, her reputation, and her freedom with a single phone call to her board of directors. I smiled as the screen confirmed her massive embezzlement, knowing her luxurious island getaway was about to become an inescapable tropical prison. The ultimate justice was finally unfolding right before my eyes, and I was going to savor every single second of their spectacular, self-inflicted downfall as I prepared to present this undeniable proof to the corporate authorities, who would show absolutely no mercy to a thief in an expensive white dress. When the time for retribution eventually arrived at the airport terminal next week, ensuring that they would face the harshest reality imaginable and pay for their cruelty. Exactly 1 week later, the sprawling international terminal at Los Angeles International Airport hummed with the frantic energy of thousands of travelers dragging heavy luggage and rushing toward their departure gates. The air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee and the constant echoing announcements over the public address system. Away from the chaotic crowds of the main concourse, the exclusive first-class check-in lounge was supposed to offer a serene escape for the wealthy elite. Instead, the plush carpeted area was currently being subjected to the piercing, irritated voice of my future sister-in-law. Brooke stood at the pristine marble counter, wearing a beige designer tracksuit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was aggressively tapping her manicured fingernails against her leather handbag, glaring at the customer service agent who was frantically typing on a computer keyboard. Darius stood right beside her, holding their matching monogrammed passports, looking incredibly anxious as he tried to appease his angry bride. Flanking them were Brooke's parents, Susan and Charles, who were putting on a masterclass in arrogant entitlement. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Brooke snapped, her voice echoing across the quiet lounge. "We are flying first class to Maui for my wedding. We booked 15 premium suites at the most expensive resort on the island. We should not be waiting in any kind of line. Where is the priority concierge I specifically requested?" The airline agent, A young woman who looked thoroughly exhausted offered a polite, strained smile. I apologize for the slight delay, ma'am. The priority concierge is currently assisting another high-tier client. I can print your boarding passes right here. Susan scoffed loudly, crossing her arms over her expensive silk blouse. She looked around the terminal with an expression of pure disgust, as if the very air was contaminated. This airline has really let its standards slip, Susan complained to her husband. They treat the premium passengers exactly the same as the economy crowds. It is exhausting having to constantly remind people of who we are and what we pay for. Charles nodded in agreement, checking his solid gold watch with an exaggerated sigh. Darius, I thought you assured us the logistics were handled flawlessly. We have important corporate partners waiting for us in Hawaii. We cannot start this trip dealing with incompetent staff. My brother swallowed hard, a nervous sweat breaking out on his forehead. He practically bowed to his future father-in-law. I am so sorry, Charles. I will handle this right now. I will demand to speak to the shift manager. Darius turned toward the counter to escalate the situation, but he suddenly froze. His eyes widened in absolute horror, and the color completely drained from his face. Brooke, noticing his sudden paralysis, followed his gaze toward the grand entrance of the first-class lounge. Her annoyed expression instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. I walked through the automatic sliding glass doors with my head held high, my posture radiating absolute authority. I was wearing a tailored navy blue blazer and sleek trousers, carrying a structured leather briefcase that screamed corporate power. I was not alone. Linking arms with me were my mother Evelyn and my father Thomas. They were not wearing the humble, worn-out clothes they usually wore to clean houses and mow lawns. I had personally taken them shopping 2 days ago. My mother looked breathtaking in a flowing emerald green resort dress, her hair perfectly styled. My father looked incredibly distinguished in a crisp, light gray linen suit and a stylish fedora. They walked with a renewed sense of dignity, their heads held high, completely unbothered by the arrogant stares of the people who had tried to discard them. Brooke's mouth dropped open. She took a step away from the counter, her eyes darting between me and my parents. "What in the world are they doing here?" she hissed at Darius. "Did you tell them to come? I explicitly said they were not invited." Darius looked like he was about to faint. "I swear to you, Brooke, I did not say a word. I told them to stay in Atlanta." Susan quickly stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she assessed our presence. She plastered a fake, condescending smile across her face and marched directly toward my parents, completely ignoring me. She clearly assumed we were there to stage a pathetic, desperate intervention or to beg for a last-minute invitation to the wedding. She believed her wealth gave her the ultimate authority to put us back in our place. "Evelyn Thomas," Susan said loudly, making sure the other wealthy passengers in the lounge could hear her. "I must admit I am quite surprised to see you here at the airport. It is so brave of you to come all this way just to see Darius off. But really, you should not have stretched your finances just to travel to Los Angeles for a quick goodbye." My mother maintained a neutral, dignified expression, refusing to let Susan's condescension break her spirit. My father stood tall, looking directly into Susan's eyes without saying a single word. Their silence only seemed to embolden the arrogant woman. Susan reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. She extended her hand, pressing the money directly toward my father's chest, with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Here, Thomas," Susan said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy and blatant microaggressions. "Take this and go buy yourselves a nice cup of coffee at the food court. You can sit down, relax, and watch the wedding ceremony on FaceTime when we arrive. It is truly for the best. People of your background simply would not be comfortable mixing with the high society crowd we are hosting at the resort. You would feel entirely out of place, and we would hate to see you struggle to fit in." Darius stood just a few feet away, watching his future mother-in-law openly degrade his parents based on their race and their perceived social class. He did not step forward. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the floor, prioritizing his proximity to wealth over the dignity of the man who raised him. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I moved with a terrifying, calculated swiftness. I stepped directly between my father and Susan, reaching out and snatching the $50 bill right out of her manicured fingers. Susan gasped, taking a startled step backward as I invaded her personal space. I held the bill up for a second, looking her dead in the eye, and then I casually dropped the money onto the polished marble floor, letting it flutter down to land right next to the toe of her expensive leather shoe. My parents do not drink cheap airport coffee, I said, my voice dangerously smooth and cold. And they certainly do not accept charity from a family of corporate thieves. Brooke shrieked from the counter. How dare you speak to my mother that way? Security! Somebody call security to remove these people. I ignored her screaming. I simply raised my right hand and signaled a man standing quietly near the private corridor. He was dressed in a sharp black suit with a discreet earpiece coiled around his neck. He immediately marched forward, completely bypassing the airline counter, and approached us with a thick red velvet rope attached to a polished brass stanchion. The man unhooked the velvet rope, clearing a private pathway that led directly toward the restricted aviation gates. He turned his back entirely on Brooke, Susan, and Charles, effectively dismissing their entire existence. He bowed his head slightly, extending his arm toward my parents with the utmost professional respect. The heavy silence in the room was deafening, as every single arrogant remark they had prepared died in their throats. They watched in absolute bewilderment as the velvet rope parted, revealing a world they desperately wanted to control, but were about to realize they could never even afford to touch. The man at the velvet rope was not an ordinary airport security guard. His tailored charcoal suit and gleaming silver lapel pin marked him as the director of VIP aviation for the entire terminal. He stepped forward, completely ignoring the sputtering outrage of Brooke and her arrogant parents. He did not ask for my boarding pass or identification. Instead, he stopped precisely 2 feet in front of me and offered a deep, respectful bow. "Good morning, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to handling billionaires and dignitaries. "It is a pleasure to have you flying with us today. Your private Gulfstream G650 is fully fueled and waiting on the exclusive South Tarmac. The flight crew has already prepared the cabin exactly to your specifications, including the vintage champagne you requested for your parents." The entire first-class lounge seemed to lose its gravitational pull. The collective gasp that had escaped from Brooke and her family was loud enough to turn the heads of the other passengers waiting in the queue. Susan, who just moments ago had tried to hand my father a pathetic $50 bill, actually stumbled backward. Her expensive leather handbag slipped from her manicured fingers and hit the marble floor with a dull thud. Charles stared at the aviation director with his mouth hanging wide open. "Private Gulfstream." Charles stammered, his face turning an unnatural shade of crimson. "There must be some kind of administrative mistake. We are the premium corporate clients here. We are the ones flying first class. This woman is just Darius's sister. She works a regular job in Atlanta." The director did not even flinch. He did not offer Charles a single glance of recognition. "There is no mistake, sir. Ms. Vance is one of our most distinguished platinum members. Now, if you will excuse us, her flight is cleared for takeoff." Brooke looked like she had just been slapped across the face with a brick. Her eyes darted wildly from my tailored navy blazer to the respectful posture of the aviation director, and finally to my parents. My mother and father stood tall, their expressions a perfect mixture of quiet dignity and absolute vindication. They did not gloat, they did not need to. The reality of the situation was doing all the heavy lifting for us. "Darius, what is going on here?" Brooke shrieked, grabbing my brother by the arm and shaking him. "You told me she was broke. You told my parents she could not afford a basic commercial ticket to Hawaii. Why is the airport director bowing to her?" My brother was completely paralyzed. His jaw moved up and down, but no words came out. He stared at me as if I had suddenly transformed into an alien species. He had spent his entire life minimizing my achievements, convincing himself that his proximity to Brooke's wealthy family made him superior. Seeing me command this level of undeniable power shattered his entire carefully constructed reality. I stepped closer to the velvet rope, making sure I was standing directly in front of Susan. She shrank back, the unearned superiority completely drained from her eyes. My parents do not fly commercial with corporate thieves, I stated, my voice echoing clearly through the quiet lounge. Enjoy your standard first-class seats, Susan. I hear the complimentary mixed nuts are absolutely delightful. Susan gasped again, clutching her chest as if she were having a medical emergency. Corporate thieves! How dare you accuse my family of such a thing? Charles, do something. Defend our honor. Charles puffed out his chest, trying to muster some level of intimidation. You listen to me, young lady. I am the CEO of a major tech conglomerate. I will have you removed from this airport for slander. I offered him a radiant, razor-sharp smile. You are the CEO of Vanguard Technology, Charles. I am fully aware of who you are, and I am also fully aware of exactly how your daughter is paying for this extravagant wedding. You might want to check her expense reports before you start threatening people with slander. Before Charles could comprehend the massive legal threat I had just dropped at his feet, the aviation director gestured toward the sliding glass doors leading out to the private tarmac. A sleek black electric golf cart pulled up to the entrance, driven by a uniformed chauffeur. Right this way, Ms. Vance, the director said smoothly. I linked my arms through my parents' arms once again. We stepped over the velvet rope, completely leaving the toxic, arrogant family behind us. My father gave Darius one final pitying look before turning his back on his son forever. We climbed into the plush leather seats of the golf cart. The chauffeur offered us warm, damp towels to refresh our hands, a standard luxury protocol that made my mother smile brightly. As the golf cart began to pull away toward the private runway, the pristine silence of the lounge erupted into absolute chaos. I could hear Brooke screaming at the top of her lungs, her carefully curated high society image completely dissolving into a childish temper tantrum. Darius, you lied to me! Brooke shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. How does your loser sister own a private jet? How does she know about my corporate expense reports? Call her right now. Make her come back here and explain herself. Darius frantically pulled out his phone, his hands shaking violently as he dialed my number. I watched his desperate reflection fade into the distance as our golf cart sped toward the waiting aircraft. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw his name flashing on the screen, and hit decline without a second thought. Brooke was finally realizing she had not just insulted a regular wedding guest. She had provoked a predator, and she was entirely unaware the trap she stood in was about to snap shut the moment her flight landed in Maui, high above the Pacific Ocean. The atmosphere inside the commercial first-class cabin was suffocatingly tense. Brooke sat rigidly in her plush leather seat, her manicured fingers gripping the armrest tightly. She had expected to board this flight, feeling like absolute royalty, surrounded by her elite family and corporate friends. Instead, she had been publicly dressed down by a woman she considered entirely beneath her. Darius sat next to her, staring blankly at the seatback screen. He was sweating through his designer shirt. The golden boy image he had spent his adult life cultivating had just been violently shattered. Susan and Charles sat across the aisle, aggressively whispering to each other while shooting venomous glares in Darius's direction. The carefully constructed facade of their high society wedding weekend was already cracking. Brooke could not handle the silence any longer. She flagged down a passing flight attendant with a sharp wave of her hand. "Excuse me," Brooke snapped, her voice carrying easily through the quiet cabin. "My fiancé and I have had an incredibly stressful morning. I need to take the edge off right now. Bring us a bottle of your absolute best vintage champagne. The Dom Perignon if you have it stocked." The flight attendant offered a polite smile. "Of course, ma'am. That specific reserve bottle is $500. Will you be paying with a credit card today?" "Obviously," Brooke scoffed, rolling her eyes. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her Vanguard Technology corporate black card. It represented her power, her title, and her unlimited access to company funds. She tossed it onto the serving tray with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Put it on there." The flight attendant nodded, retrieving a mobile payment terminal from her apron pocket. She inserted the heavy metal card into the chip reader and waited. A sharp negative beep emitted from the small device. The attendant frowned slightly, pulling the card out and wiping the chip on her sleeve before inserting it again. Another harsh beep echoed in the quiet cabin. "I apologize, ma'am," the flight attendant said. "Your card has been declined. Do you perhaps have another form of payment you would prefer to use?" Brooke's eyes widened in sheer outrage. She sat up straight, drawing the attention of the other wealthy passengers seated nearby. Declined. That is a corporate executive account with a limit higher than your annual salary. Your machine is broken. Run it again. The flight attendant maintained her professional composure. She swiped the magnetic strip this time. The terminal processed for 3 agonizing seconds before emitting the exact same loud negative rejection beep. I assure you, my machine is functioning perfectly, ma'am, the flight attendant replied. Tone noticeably cooler now. The transaction has been blocked by your financial institution. I cannot serve the champagne without an approved payment method. Susan leaned across the aisle, her face flushed with extreme embarrassment. Several business executives in the neighboring seats were openly watching the scene unfold. Brooke, lower your voice, Susan hissed through clenched teeth. People are staring at us. Just use your personal card and stop making a scene. Brooke's face flushed a deep red. She did not want to admit that her personal credit cards were completely maxed out from purchasing designer luggage for this trip. She turned fiercely toward Darius, shoving her empty hand into his chest. Give her your card, Darius. Now. Do not just sit there while this woman insults me. Darius jolted, his hands shaking as he quickly retrieved his wallet. He pulled out his platinum credit card. He handed it to the flight attendant with an apologetic look. Put it on this one, please. I am sorry for the confusion. The flight attendant took his card and swiped it through the terminal. The machine paused, thinking for a moment before delivering another loud, unmistakable rejection beep. Darius froze. His breathing hitched in his throat. He had checked the balance just yesterday to ensure he had enough runway for any unexpected wedding expenses. That is impossible, Darius muttered. Try it again. Run it as a credit. The flight attendant sighed, swiping the card one final time. The machine beeped its rejection immediately. Sir, your financial institution has placed a hard lock on this account. I will be taking the champagne back to the galley now. Please let me know if you would like a complimentary glass of water. The flight attendant turned and walked away, leaving Brooke and Darius sitting in a cloud of absolute humiliation. Snickers and hushed whispers erupted from the surrounding passengers. Susan sank back into her seat, physically turning her body away from her daughter to avoid association. Charles aggressively put on his noise-canceling headphones, completely washing his hands of their pathetic display. Brooke hyperventilated. Embarrassment burned a hole straight through her chest. This was supposed to be her triumphant journey to her elite destination wedding. Instead, she was being publicly shamed over a declined credit card, like a common teenager. Desperate to figure out what was happening, she connected her smartphone to the onboard wireless internet network. She intended to open her banking application to verify her balances, convinced this was all a massive banking error. As her phone connected to the internet, a notification banner violently dropped down across her home screen. It was not a fraud alert from her bank. It was an automated email flagged with high-priority urgency. The sender was Vanguard Technology, Human Resources, and Global Compliance. Brooke's thumb trembled as she tapped the notification, opening the message. The text was stark devoid of corporate pleasantries. It stated that her corporate account's executive privileges and company-issued credit lines had been permanently frozen. The email stated her financial access was suspended pending a federal compliance investigation initiated by an independent forensic auditing firm. Brooke stared at the terrifying words, the blood draining from her face as the suffocating reality of her impending destruction began to set in. Brooke stared blindly at her glowing smartphone screen, her chest heaving as she reread the terrifying compliance email over and over again until the words blurred together. The commercial airliner hit the Hawaiian tarmac with a heavy thud, jolting her rigid body. Outside the small oval window, the tropical paradise of Maui shimmered under a flawless blue sky, but inside the cabin the atmosphere was thick with absolute dread. Brooke quickly shoved the expensive phone deep into her designer handbag, her hands shaking violently. She could not tell her parents about the email. If Susan and Charles found out that her corporate accounts were frozen under suspicion of a federal financial investigation, they would abandon her at the baggage claim without hesitation. She needed to get to the resort immediately and secure the rooms before the hotel system registered the corporate freeze. Darius unbuckled his seatbelt, wiping a thick layer of sweat from his forehead with the back of his trembling hand. He looked at his bride, his eyes wide with desperate silent questions, but Brooke shot him a venomous glare that immediately shut him down entirely. They grabbed their luxury carry-on bags and practically sprinted down the narrow aisle. Susan and Charles struggled to keep up, complaining loudly about the suffocating tropical humidity the exact moment they stepped onto the jet bridge. Brooke marched ruthlessly ahead, her expensive beige designer tracksuit now clinging to her damp skin. The entire airport experience became a grueling, humiliating blur of absolute panic. They stood at the chaotic baggage carousel for 40 agonizing minutes, surrounded by screaming children and sunburned tourists. Every single passing second felt exactly like a ticking time bomb slowly counting down. When they finally secured their massive, ridiculous pile of heavy, oversized designer luggage, Brooke refused to wait in the standard taxi queue. She hailed a premium black car service, praying silently that the driver would not ask for an upfront credit card authorization. Luckily, the driver simply loaded their heavy bags into the spacious trunk and opened the passenger doors with a polite smile. The air conditioning blasted against their sweaty faces as the vehicle merged onto the beautiful coastal highway. Brooke sat rigidly in the front seat, staring straight ahead at the winding tropical roads. The tension inside the car was suffocatingly thick. Darius nervously bounced his knee in the back seat, earning a sharp, reprimanding slap on the thigh from Susan, who was loudly complaining about her swelling ankles and the unbearable heat. 45 minutes later, the black car turned down a pristine palm tree-lined driveway, leading to the most exclusive, ultra-luxurious resort on the entire island. The sprawling, massive estate featured cascading waterfalls, exotic floral gardens, and a breathtaking open-air lobby overlooking the crystal-clear Pacific Ocean. Valets in crisp white uniforms rushed forward to open the car doors, offering fresh orchid leis and chilled tropical drinks to the arriving guests. Brooke swatted the beautiful floral necklace away. She did not have time for traditional island pleasantries. She needed the physical room keys in her hand right now. She aggressively marched past the welcoming staff, her high heels clicking aggressively against the polished mahogany floors of the grand lobby. Darius trailed closely behind her, pulling two heavy suitcases, while Susan and Charles lingered near the entrance, trying to project an air of old-money superiority despite their rumpled, exhausted appearances. Brooke approached the designated VIP reception desk, slamming her heavy leather handbag down onto the pristine marble counter. She plastered a fake demanding smile across her face, channeling every single ounce of corporate arrogance she possessed to mask the sheer absolute terror consuming her internal organs. "Good afternoon," Brooke announced, her voice loud and carrying an undeniable tone of absolute entitlement. "I am Brooke Thornton. I am the Vice President of Corporate Events for Vanguard Technology. I have an elite corporate reservation under my name for 15 of your premium luxury oceanfront suites. We have had an absolutely horrendous travel morning, and I need all 15 physical room keys issued to me immediately. My parents require their luggage delivered to the master penthouse suite within the next 10 minutes." The concierge, a sharply dressed man with a welcoming smile, immediately stood up straight and offered a polite professional nod. He recognized the tone of a demanding high society guest and moved with practiced efficiency. "Welcome to beautiful Maui, Ms. Thornton," the concierge replied smoothly, his hands gliding across his computer keyboard. "We have been expecting your corporate party. Please allow me just one brief moment to pull up the Vanguard Technology master file and generate your premium access cards." Brooke let out a sharp, impatient exhale, tapping her manicured nails aggressively against the marble counter. Darius stood directly behind her, holding his breath, silently praying that the corporate booking was still completely safe and intact. Susan and Charles finally strolled over to the desk, standing tall, waiting patiently to be escorted to their luxurious penthouse. The concierge clicked his computer mouse, his eyes scanning the digital reservation system. Suddenly, his practiced welcoming smile completely vanished. His fingers stopped typing entirely. He leaned closer to the monitor, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He pressed a few more keys, refreshing the screen, but his expression only grew more severe. The warm, accommodating hospitality professional disappeared, replaced by a cold, cautious wall of strict hotel policy. Brooke felt a cold drop of sweat slide slowly down the direct center of her lower spine. Her tapping fingers froze. The concierge slowly looked up from his glowing monitor, meeting Brooke's panicked eyes with an expression of absolute, unwavering finality. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, Ms. Thornton." The concierge stated, his voice flat and devoid of any previous warmth. "But I cannot issue you any room keys today. According to our central booking system, your entire block of 15 luxury suites was permanently canceled exactly 3 hours ago by the Vanguard Technology Compliance Office." The concierge's words hung in the humid air, heavy and absolute. Silence descended upon the VIP reception desk. Then the dam broke. Brooke slammed her hands flat against the marble counter, the sound cracking like a whip. "Cancelled by the compliance office!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch that shattered the serene atmosphere of the lobby. "That is a lie. That is an absolute lie. Do you have any idea who you are talking to? I am a vice president. I am the one who booked those suites. Nobody authorized a cancellation. Fix your system right now and give me my keys." The concierge did not flinch. He did not offer an apologetic smile or attempt to placate her. He simply stepped back, signaling to a colleague behind the desk. "I assure you, Ms. Thornton, our systems are functioning perfectly. The cancellation order came directly from your corporate headquarters, accompanied by a hard freeze on the payment method provided. I am not authorized to override a corporate fraud alert." The word fraud echoed through the lobby. Several affluent guests waiting nearby stopped their quiet conversations, turning their heads to watch the unfolding spectacle. Susan gasped loudly, clutching Charles's arm, as a deep, humiliating flush crept up her neck. Charles looked around, frantically desperate to shield their elite social status from the growing crowd of onlookers. Darius stood frozen, his designer shirt completely soaked in sweat, his eyes darting toward the resort entrance where their wedding guests were scheduled to arrive at any moment. Brooke completely lost her mind in front of everyone. She violently lunged forward, leaning entirely over the polished marble counter, her face contorted with unadulterated rage. "You are incompetent! You are an incompetent idiot!" she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I want the general manager out here this exact second. Fetch him right now, or I swear I will have your job. I will have this resort shut down." Instead of cowering, the concierge pressed a discreet button under his desk. Within 30 seconds, heavy wooden doors behind the reception area swung open. A tall, distinguished man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out. He was not alone. Two large, muscular resort security officers in crisp uniforms flanked him, their expressions stern and uncompromising. The general manager approached the counter with a measured, deliberate stride, stopping directly across from the hysterical bride. "I am the general manager of this property, Ms. Thornton," he stated, his voice calm, resonant, and entirely devoid of hospitality. "And I must ask you to lower your voice immediately. You are disturbing our guests." Brooke scoffed, throwing her hands up in the air. "I am your guest. I am your most important guest this entire weekend. Your incompetent staff just told me my 15 premium suites were canceled. I demand you fix this massive error and upgrade my parents to the presidential suite as compensation for this horrible treatment." The general manager did not blink. He looked at Brooke with a mixture of professional detachment and profound pity. "There is no error to fix. Your corporate sponsor, Vanguard Technology, contacted our finance department directly 3 hours ago. They informed us that the $250,000 used to secure this wedding block was flagged as a severe compliance violation. The funds have been identified as potentially embezzled corporate assets." Susan let out a sharp, horrified shriek. She physically stumbled backward, leaning heavily against a decorative stone pillar to keep from collapsing. Charles stepped forward, his face purple with rage. "Embezzled? How dare you accuse my daughter of such a thing in a public space? Do you know who I am? I am a corporate CEO. I will sue this resort for every penny it is worth." The general manager remained completely unfazed by the wealthy man's threats. He simply crossed his hands in front of him. "You are welcome to contact our legal department, sir. However, the directive we received was explicit. Vanguard Technology has officially withdrawn all financial backing for this event." Furthermore, they instructed us to inform you that your employment has been terminated effective immediately, Ms. Thornton. Your corporate credit lines are completely frozen. You have no valid reservation, and you currently have no means to pay for one. Brooke covered her mouth with her trembling hands, tears of pure terror finally spilling over her eyelashes. The reality of the compliance email she had received on the airplane crashed down upon her. She was not just losing her luxury wedding suites. She had lost her prestigious job, her six-figure salary, and her entire professional reputation in one swift, brutal stroke. The murmurs from the surrounding lobby grew louder. Susan grabbed Brooke by the arm, her fingernails digging painfully into her daughter's flesh. "Brooke, tell me right now that he is lying. Tell me you did not steal corporate money to pay for this wedding. The Montgomery family is arriving in 15 minutes. The entire board of directors from your father's firm is landing this afternoon. You cannot do this to us. You cannot humiliate us like this." Brooke sobbed loudly, shaking her head frantically, completely unable to form a single coherent sentence. Her high society facade had completely disintegrated into a puddle of pathetic criminal desperation. Charles turned his furious gaze toward Darius. The arrogant father-in-law, who had looked down on my parents just hours ago now, looked at my brother with wild, desperate expectation. "Darius, do something," Charles demanded, pointing a shaking finger at his future son-in-law. "You are marrying into this family. You are supposed to be a successful wealth manager. Step up and handle this situation right now. Pay for these rooms out of pocket so we can get out of this public lobby before our guests see this absolute disaster." Darius swallowed hard, the immense pressure of his golden boy persona crushing down on his shoulders. He looked at the furious faces of his elite in-laws, the sobbing mess of his disgraced fiancée, and the stern security guards preparing to escort them off the property. He had spent his entire life sacrificing his actual family to earn the approval of these wealthy, arrogant strangers. He could not lose it all now. He could not let them see him as a failure. Darius nodded quickly, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I will fix it. I will handle it right now, Charles. Do not worry." Darius reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He stepped away from the counter, scrolling through his contacts with trembling thumbs to execute his ultimate backup plan. He took a deep, shaky breath to steady his nerves before he tapped the brightly illuminated screen to dial his private mortgage broker, completely oblivious that he was playing right into my perfectly laid trap. The ringing phone echoed faintly against my brother's ear, a desperate sound completely swallowed by the rising panic spreading across the opulent resort lobby. While Darius paced in a tight, frantic circle waiting for his mortgage broker to finally answer, the heavy glass doors at the resort entrance slid open with a soft hum. The humid ocean breeze swept into the air-conditioned space, carrying the sweet scent of hibiscus and salt water. I strolled through the grand entryway with deliberate, unhurried steps, savoring the perfection of the moment. I was wearing a pristine white linen resort suit that draped flawlessly over my frame, paired with oversized designer sunglasses pushed up into my hair. In my right hand, I held an icy, perfectly crafted mojito, complete with a tiny paper umbrella. In my left arm, tucked securely against my ribs, was a thick manila folder sealed with a glaring red confidentiality sticker. The contrast between my serene posture and the meltdown occurring at the VIP reception desk was cinematic. Brooke was still hyperventilating her expensive mascara, running in dark, jagged streaks down her flushed cheeks, while her parents frantically tried to shield her from the increasingly curious stares of their arriving high society guests. Susan was the first person to spot me. Her eyes narrowed into furious slits, her jaw dropping in sheer disbelief as she nudged her husband. Charles followed her gaze, his face contorting with a fresh wave of hostility. Brooke suddenly spun around, her tear-streaked face violently twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. She completely abandoned her fragile, victimized bride persona, lunging forward with her fists clenched tightly at her sides. "What are you doing here?" Brooke shrieked, her voice cracking as it echoed off the marble columns. "Did you actually follow us? Did you book a cheap motel down the street just to come here and beg for a handout? Security, I want this woman removed immediately. She is stalking my family." I did not stop walking. I took a slow, refreshing sip of my mojito, letting the ice clink softly against the glass before I lowered it. I smoothly bypassed Brooke entirely, not even offering her the basic dignity of a direct glance, and walked straight toward the general manager, who was still standing defensively behind the marble counter with his security team. Darius finally lowered his phone from his ear, the call to his mortgage broker completely forgotten as he stared at me in horrified confusion. "Sienna, have you lost your mind?" Darius hissed, grabbing my elbow as I passed him. "You are embarrassing us in front of Brooke's entire family. Get out of here before you make this disaster even worse." I smoothly yanked my arm out of his grasp, shooting him a look so cold it made him physically recoil. "Do not touch me, Darius, and do not presume to give me orders while you are standing in a lobby, trying to figure out how to steal more money to pay for a room you cannot afford." Susan marched forward, her fake country club elegance entirely replaced by overt hostility. "Listen carefully, you pathetic, jealous girl," Susan snarled, pointing a trembling finger inches from my face. My daughter's corporate reservation was just canceled by some incompetent glitch in the Vanguard technology compliance system. We are dealing with a massive financial error. We do not have the patience to deal with your ghetto dramatic outbursts. Leave this property right now, or my husband will have you arrested for trespassing. I turned to face Susan, offering her a smile that was entirely devoid of warmth. I raised my glass, gesturing vaguely toward the bewildered general manager and the two burly security guards who were watching the exchange with intense scrutiny. "There is no system glitch, Susan," I stated, my voice projecting clearly across the lobby. "And there is absolutely no administrative error. Vanguard Technology permanently canceled your daughter's fraudulent reservation because they were legally advised to do so. They were advised by the independent firm that officially uncovered her massive systemic financial crimes." Brooke let out a hysterical, mocking laugh, aggressively wiping the smeared makeup from under her eyes. "Are you insane? You do not know anything about Vanguard Technology. You run some tiny, irrelevant business in Atlanta. You are a complete nobody." I finally turned my full attention to Brooke. The terrified bride was desperately clinging to the last shreds of her elitist delusion. I set my mojito down on the polished marble counter with a sharp click. I reached under my arm and retrieved the thick, heavy manila folder. "Allow me to formally reintroduce myself," I said, my voice ringing out with undeniable authority. "I am not just the sister you tried to banish to the economy class. I am Sienna Vance, the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Compliance and Financial Auditing. 2 weeks ago, the executive board of directors at Vanguard Technology hired my firm to conduct a ruthless third-party forensic audit of their corporate spending. I am the lead forensic auditor who personally reviewed every single one of your department's ledgers." Brooke completely stopped breathing now. The color drained from Charles's face as he finally recognized the undeniable name of the prestigious auditing firm his own conglomerate frequently utilized. I raised the folder high in the air so every wealthy guest hotel employee and security guard in the lobby could see it. I slammed the heavy document down onto the marble reception desk with a thunderous crack. The thick red stamp on the front cover boldly read, "Vanguard Compliance Violation, Confidential." "I am not here to crash your wedding, Brooke," I declared loudly, ensuring my voice carried to the arriving crowd of elite corporate executives standing near the entrance. "I am here in my official capacity as a corporate auditor to inform you that you have just been caught embezzling exactly $300,000 of company funds to finance this massive fraudulent destination wedding." The echo of my declaration hung in the humid air of the lavish lobby. The murmurs of the elite wedding guests instantly ceased, replaced by a suffocating, horrified silence. Brooke looked as if all the blood had been violently siphoned from her body. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land, completely incapable of forming a single coherent word. Charles, however, reacted exactly how an arrogant, privileged corporate executive usually reacts when publicly cornered. He puffed out his chest, his face turning an angry mottled shade of crimson, and stomped directly toward me. He pointed a thick, manicured finger inches from my face, completely ignoring the sheer magnitude of the evidence resting on the marble counter. "I do not know what kind of pathetic, jealous stunt you think you are pulling," Charles bellowed, his voice dripping with absolute contempt and unearned authority. "But you have just made the biggest mistake of your miserable life. I am a chief executive officer. I play golf with the heavyweights of the financial sector. You are nothing but a low-level auditor who let a personal family grudge cloud her professional judgment. I am going to call the head of your auditing firm right now. I will have you fired, blacklisted, and stripped of your credentials before you can even walk out of this lobby. You will never work in corporate finance again. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked at his trembling, furious finger and let out a sharp, genuinely amused laugh. The sound of my laughter seemed to confuse him, breaking his aggressive momentum. I reached out and calmly pushed his hand away from my face. You are more than welcome to try and call my boss Charles, I said, a dangerous smile spreading across my lips. But you are going to have a very difficult time getting her on the phone, considering you are already speaking directly to her. I do not work for Apex Compliance and Financial Auditing. I built it. I own it. I am the sole founder and chief executive officer of the firm. I do not answer to middle management, and I certainly do not answer to you. The only people I report to are the executive board members of Vanguard Technology, and they are the exact people who explicitly hired me to hunt down the corporate thief draining their quarterly budget. Susan let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching her husband's arm, as the reality of my position finally crushed their fragile superiority complex. Charles stumbled backward, his arrogant threats completely dissolving into terrified silence. He had tried to weaponize his privilege against me, only to discover I held the ultimate corporate authority. I turned my attention back to the red-stamped folder on the desk, flipping it open to the first page of the itemized financial ledger. Since you seem so eager to defend your daughter's honor, I announced, raising my voice so the surrounding crowd of guests could hear every single damning detail. Let us review exactly how she funded this spectacular high society event. On May 14th, Brooke authorized a corporate wire transfer of $45,000. She coded it in the company ledger as a leadership summit team-building dinner. The actual vendor receipt proves she used those exact funds to pay for imported caviar stations and a custom 5-tier wedding cake. Brooke let out a pathetic, whimpering sob, shaking her head frantically as the guests began to murmur in absolute shock. I flipped to the next page of the audit file, keeping my gaze locked onto her terrified eyes. On June 2nd, Brooke approved a corporate expense of $60,000. I continued relentlessly. She categorized it as venue decor and branding materials for the Pacific Corporate Retreat. The forensic audit confirms she wired that money directly to an elite floral designer in Los Angeles to secure thousands of rare white orchids for her bridal canopy. She even had the absolute audacity to charge her $75,000 designer wedding dress to Vanguard Technology, labeling it as high-end promotional wardrobe expenses. The murmurs in the lobby transformed into outright gasps of horror. The wealthy corporate friends and elite socialites who had flown across the ocean to celebrate Brooke were now looking at her with absolute disgust. She was no longer a glowing, wealthy bride. She had been publicly stripped down to her true form. She was a desperate, calculating fraud who had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain an illusion of wealth she did not possess. The general manager of the resort stood nearby, shaking his head in sheer disbelief at the magnitude of the financial crimes documented in my folder. Brooke collapsed onto her knees right there on the polished marble floor. Her perfect high society wedding was completely obliterated. The luxury suites were gone. Her prestigious executive career was permanently terminated. She was currently standing in a hotel lobby surrounded by irrefutable evidence of her federal crimes, and she knew the Vanguard Board of Directors would absolutely pursue criminal charges. The paralyzing fear of impending prison time finally snapped her completely out of her luxurious delusion. She scrambled back up to her feet, her eyes wild and manic. She completely ignored her horrified parents and the disgusted stares of her former friends. She spun around and launched herself directly at Darius, grabbing him violently by the lapels of his sweat-soaked designer shirt. "Pay it right now!" Brooke screamed at him, her voice tearing through the crowded lobby in a sudden pitch of pure, unhinged desperation. "You have to pay the $300,000 immediately. Take out your phone and the money to the resort and to Vanguard. We have to cover the stolen funds right now, before the local police get involved. Do it right now, Darius." or they are going to send me to a federal jail." Brooke's frantic screams bounced off the high vaulted ceilings of the luxury resort lobby, each shrill demand piercing the heavy silence that had settled over the crowd of elite wedding guests. She dug her manicured nails into the lapels of Darius's expensive shirt, shaking him with a terrifying, unhinged strength. Darius stumbled backward, his polished Italian leather shoes slipping slightly on the pristine marble floor. He looked absolutely pathetic. The golden boy facade, meticulously crafted over decades of parental sacrifice and financial deception, was melting away under the scorching heat of public humiliation. He darted his eyes toward Susan and Charles. The wealthy corporate executives were no longer looking at him like a promising future son-in-law. They were glaring at him like a rabid animal that needed to be put down immediately. Charles took a threatening step forward, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. I demanded that Darius fix this catastrophic mess right now, threatening to completely ruin his wealth management career if he did not produce the $300,000 this exact second. Darius was completely cornered. He had no corporate safety net to catch him. His personal credit cards were completely maxed out. His checking accounts were effectively empty. The only leverage he had left in the entire world was a dark, unforgivable secret he had deeply buried months ago. His hands shook violently as he reached into his trouser pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He avoided making eye contact with anyone in the room, especially my parents, who were standing just a few feet away, watching his frantic movements with growing concern. Evelyn took a hesitant step forward, her voice soft and trembling, as she asked him what he was doing. Darius ignored her completely. He frantically scrolled through his digital contact list, his thumb hovering over a specific name. He tapped the screen and lifted the phone to his ear, his breathing shallow and rapid. The line rang 3 agonizing times before a man finally answered the call. Darius did not bother with any pleasantries. He demanded that his broker authorize an emergency wire transfer directly to the Vanguard Technology Compliance Department and the resort's financial office. The ambient noise in the massive lobby made it difficult for Darius to hear the muffled response. In a moment of sheer panic and terrible judgment, he pulled the phone away from his ear and activated the speakerphone function, turning the volume all the way up. The voice of his mortgage broker, a man named Greg, echoed clearly across the quiet reception area. Greg sounded incredibly confused and highly stressed. He asked Darius what he was talking about, reminding him that the secondary equity line was already completely tapped out. My father Thomas stepped forward, his brow furrowing in deep, unsettling confusion. Thomas asked Darius what equity line the man on the phone was talking about. Darius squeezed his eyes shut, a single bead of sweat dripping from his chin onto his silk tie. He had absolutely no choice but to confess his ultimate sin in front of the entire crowd. "Greg, just push the emergency funds through right now," Darius pleaded into the speaker, his voice cracking with absolute desperation. "I am the primary executor on the account. I have the legal power of attorney. I authorized the secondary mortgage on the Atlanta property 6 months ago. The house is fully paid off. There has to be at least $300,000 left in the available equity pool. Wire it to the resort immediately, or my entire life is over." The horrible words hung in the humid air, dripping with absolute devastating betrayal. My mother let out a strangled, agonizing gasp, her knees buckling slightly beneath her weight. My father caught her by the waist, his own face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. They had given Darius a limited power of attorney years ago to handle some minor tax filings when my father was hospitalized for a brief heart condition. They trusted their golden boy implicitly. They never imagined he would maliciously weaponize that legal document behind their backs. Darius had secretly leveraged their fully paid-off 4-bedroom family home, the exact same house my mother scrubbed bloody floors to pay for, just to finance his fake wealthy lifestyle. He had essentially stolen the roof right over their heads to impress a family of racist corporate thieves. Brooke did not care about my parents' absolute devastation. She aggressively grabbed Darius's arms, screaming directly into the speakerphone, violently ordering Greg to wire the cash immediately so she could avoid a federal prison sentence. Greg let out a long, heavy sigh that crackled through the mobile speaker. He sounded completely terrified of the escalating situation. Darius, I cannot authorize a wire transfer. Greg stated, his voice tight with extreme anxiety. I tried to call you yesterday morning, but your phone went straight to voicemail. I cannot access the funds. The entire equity line was permanently frozen by the underwriting department. You missed 3 consecutive monthly payments, and the bank triggered an automatic default protocol. Darius dropped to his knees on the marble floor, his face pale and completely slick with sweat. He begged Greg to pull some strings, frantically promising to pay triple the interest rate if he could just bypass the banking system for one single hour. Greg's next words completely shattered whatever tiny sliver of hope Darius had left clinging to his chest. You do not understand, Darius, Greg replied nervously, his voice echoing loudly through the speaker for everyone to hear. The bank does not own your mortgage anymore. The massive debt was officially sold off to a highly aggressive private collection agency yesterday afternoon. You no longer possess any legal rights or financial leverage whatsoever. You are completely ruined, and there is absolutely nothing anyone at this institution can do to help you out of this impossible situation you have created for yourself today. The line went completely dead. The dial tone echoed from the speaker of Darius's phone before he numbly lowered his hand. The massive resort lobby, previously buzzing with the hushed whispers of horrified wedding guests, fell into a deep, suffocating silence. My mother Evelyn let out a soft, broken whimper, burying her face into my father's shoulder. Thomas wrapped his arms tightly around his wife, his eyes fixed on Darius with a mixture of profound grief and utter disbelief. The son they had sacrificed everything for the boy, they had scrubbed floors and drained retirement accounts to elevate, had just casually admitted to leveraging the very roof over their heads to pay for a luxurious vacation he could not afford. Brooke stood frozen, her tear-streaked face turning an ashen shade of gray as she realized that her golden ticket to a wealthy life was nothing more than a desperate drowning fraud. Susan and Charles physically backed away from Darius, treating him as if he were highly contagious. I stepped forward, my low heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. My eyes were blazing with a cold, calculated fury that forced Darius to finally look directly at me. Did you honestly think I would not find out? I asked, my voice deadly quiet, but carrying enough power to reach the back of the lobby. Did you really believe you could forge a legal document, steal from our parents, and simply walk away to live your perfect high society life in Chicago? You missed 3 consecutive payments, Darius. I fired back, slicing through his ridiculous excuses. You did not just borrow money, you actively defaulted on a fraudulent loan secured by the only major asset our parents possess. You put them on the brink of absolute foreclosure just so you could buy imported caviar and rent luxury cabanas for people who actively despise you. Brooke's father, Charles, crossed his arms tightly. This is absolute madness. You forged a power of attorney to steal from your own family. You are a complete liability, Darius. Darius ignored Charles, looking desperately at me. Greg said the debt was sold to a private collection agency. They are going to seize the house Sienna. They are going to evict Mom and Dad. You have to use your corporate funds to pay off the collection agency. You are a CEO. You have the capital. You have to save them. I already saved them, I stated smoothly, lifting my chin. The private collection agency did not just randomly buy your bad debt, Darius. When I initiated the corporate forensic audit into Brooke's expenses, I ran a comprehensive background check on her immediate associates to trace where the stolen Vanguard funds might have been funneled. That included pulling your complete financial profile. I saw the massive secondary mortgage attached to our parents' address. I saw the 3 missed payments. I saw the impending default notice. Darius stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. My firm is not just an auditing company. I continued, making sure the elite guests surrounding us absorbed every single word. We have a highly aggressive wealth management and asset recovery division. The absolute second I realized you had forged our father's signature to secure that fraudulent equity line, I instructed my acquisitions team to aggressively pursue the debt. I bought your defaulted loan directly from the bank yesterday afternoon. I turned to my parents, my expression softening for the first time since I walked into the resort. It means your home is completely safe, Mom. The bank cannot touch it. The creditors cannot touch it. I legally own the lien on your property now, and I am formally dissolving the debt. Nobody is going to evict you. Your house belongs to you and it always will. My father closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking down his weathered cheek. He let out a long, shuddering breath of immense relief. I turned my attention back to Darius. My soft expression vanished, replaced by an unbreakable wall of legal authority. I protected our parents from the financial ruin you orchestrated, I told him. But I cannot protect you from the legal consequences of your actions, and frankly, I have absolutely no desire to do so. Sienna, please, Darius begged, his voice cracking as he clasped his hands together. Do not do this. I will pay you back every single cent. I will sign whatever contracts you want. Just keep this in the family. We can handle this privately. There is no handling this privately, I replied, shaking my head slowly. You did not just make a poor financial investment. You engaged in severe premeditated mortgage fraud. You falsified legal signatures to secure a massive loan across state lines. You used a digital banking portal to initiate the transfer, which officially constitutes federal wire fraud. You are a wealth manager, Darius. You know exactly what the mandatory sentencing guidelines are for these specific crimes. Brooke let out a sharp, hysterical sob. She backed away from Darius, shaking her head wildly as she looked at her furious parents. Mom, Dad, I did not know. I swear to you, I had no idea he was doing this. I thought he was using his trust fund. I thought he was successful. He is a criminal. Susan spat, her tone dripping with venom. He is a manipulative, low-class criminal who dragged our daughter into his pathetic financial mess. Darius ignored Susan, stepping toward me with wild, panicked eyes. You cannot turn me in, Sienna. I will lose my licensing. I will be disbarred from the financial sector. I am your brother. You cannot ruin my life over a mistake. I am not ruining your life. I stated, my voice echoing with finality. You ruined your own life the second you decided our parents were expendable assets. You thought you could sacrifice their safety to buy your way into a family that views you as nothing more than a diversity prop. I reached into my tailored blazer and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. I held it out toward him. I already filed the paperwork, I announced, watching hope die in his eyes. I submitted a comprehensive police report to the authorities in Atlanta this morning. You are under investigation for felony elder financial abuse. The detectives are waiting for you to arrive home now. The heavy glass doors of the resort lobby seemed to trap the stale, suffocating air around us. Darius collapsed completely onto the marble floor. His perfectly tailored suit jacket wrinkled as his hands grabbed the sides of his head in absolute despair. The mention of waiting detectives finally shattered his arrogant delusion. He was no longer a wealthy corporate elite. He was a cornered criminal facing immediate federal prison time. I watched him hyperventilate, feeling absolutely zero sympathy for the man who tried to sacrifice our hardworking parents to fund his pathetic, shallow lifestyle. Charles stepped aggressively into the center of the chaotic scene. The wealthy chief executive officer who had previously tried to intimidate me with his corporate title now directed his explosive rage entirely at my brother. The polite, passive-aggressive country club facade completely vanished. Charles looked down at Darius with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the look of a man who realized he had allowed a parasite into his prestigious family lineage. He sneered, his face turning a dark, mottled purple as he prepared to unleash his true colors. "Get up off the floor, you pathetic, worthless fraud!" Charles roared, his booming voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings and drawing gasps from the remaining wedding guests. I knew the very first day Brooke brought you to our estate that you did not belong with us. You dressed in expensive suits and memorized the right corporate buzzwords, but you could never hide what you truly are. You are nothing but a common street criminal masquerading as a gentleman. I should have trusted my instincts and banned you from our lives the second you stepped onto my property. Susan marched forward, standing right beside her husband. The thinly veiled microaggressions she had used at the airport were entirely gone. She did not bother offering fake smiles or $50 bills anymore. She looked at Darius like he was a piece of trash stuck to the bottom of her expensive leather shoes. We bent over backward to accommodate your ridiculous ghetto family. Susan shrieked, pointing her manicured finger at my brother's trembling frame. We allowed you to sit at our dinner table. We introduced you to our elite corporate partners. We actively tried to elevate you out of whatever miserable working-class neighborhood you crawled out of. And how do you repay our incredible generosity? You dragged my beautiful daughter into a massive federal fraud investigation. You are a disgusting, manipulative con artist, and you will never be good enough to marry into this family. Darius looked up at his future mother-in-law with wild, tear-filled eyes. He reached his hand out toward her, desperately trying to salvage the broken pieces of his fake life. He begged them to understand, swearing he only committed the financial crimes to give Brooke the flawless wedding she deserved. He promised he could fix everything if they just gave him a small loan to pay for a top-tier defense attorney. Charles let out a harsh, barking laugh that held absolutely no humor. He aggressively kicked Darius's outstretched hand away. I would not give you a single red cent if you were dying in the street. Charles spat viciously. You are radioactive. You are going to federal prison, and you are absolutely not dragging the Vanguard Technology brand down into the mud with you. We are severing all ties with you right this exact second. You do not exist to us anymore. Charles grabbed Brooke by her shoulders and spun her around to face him. Brooke was still sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect makeup completely ruined by her tears of terror. The reality of her own massive embezzlement charges was still hanging heavily over her head, but her parents were entirely focused on immediate damage control. Brooke, you need to listen to me right now, Charles demanded, shaking her slightly to force her attention. This man is a complete liability. He has no money, no career, and the police are actively hunting him down for elder financial abuse. If you stay attached to him for one more minute, the media will absolutely destroy our family reputation. The board of directors will crucify us. You have to cut him loose immediately to save whatever is left of your own future. Susan grabbed her daughter's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging deep into Brooke's skin. Do what your father says, Brooke. This man is a criminal. He lied to us about his wealth. He lied to us about his background. He used your corporate access to fund his own pathetic delusions of grandeur. You have to break off this engagement right now. You must distance yourself from this toxic garbage before he drags you into a prison cell right alongside him. Brooke stood frozen between her furious, demanding parents and the sobbing, pathetic man kneeling on the floor. She looked at Darius, the man she had planned to marry, in a lavish oceanfront ceremony tomorrow afternoon. She saw a broke, disgraced, and utterly defeated fraud. Brooke did not possess a single ounce of genuine loyalty or love in her cold, calculating heart. She was a parasitic survivor who only cared about her own luxury and social survival. Brooke violently wiped the running mascara from her cheeks, her expression hardening into a mask of pure, selfish survival. She aggressively grabbed her left hand and yanked the massive, expensive diamond engagement ring right off her finger. She did not shed a single tear for the death of her relationship. She looked down at Darius with the exact same vile, racist contempt her parents had just openly displayed. Brooke pulled her arm back with vicious force and threw the heavy diamond ring directly at Darius's chest, officially disowning the man she claimed to love, just to save herself. The heavy diamond caught the ambient light of the lobby chandeliers as it spun in a slow, erratic circle before coming to a complete stop against the polished base of a marble planter. Darius did not stand to retrieve it. He scrambled forward on his hands and knees, his tailored suit trousers scraping harshly against the floor. He lunged for the discarded engagement ring, his fingers trembling so violently that he actually fumbled the expensive piece of jewelry twice before managing to close his sweaty fist around it. He knelt there for a long moment, breathing heavily, surrounded by the suffocating silence of the elite crowd. Brooke and her parents had already turned their backs, marching briskly toward the resort exit without casting a single backward glance. The grand high society future Darius had lied, cheated, and stolen to secure was evaporating right in front of his eyes. He slowly lifted his head, his tear-filled eyes darting wildly around the room until they locked onto me. I stood entirely motionless, flanked by our mother and father projecting an aura of absolute unbreakable calm. Darius did not attempt to stand with any remaining shred of dignity. Instead, he stayed low to the ground, shuffling forward on his knees until he was just a few feet from my designer shoes. The golden boy of the family, the man who had spent his entire adult life looking down on my career and our parents' working-class background, was now literally crawling toward me. He looked up at my face, clutching the useless diamond ring against his chest, like a physical shield against his impending federal prison sentence. "Sienna, you have to help me," Darius begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic, desperate whine that echoed through the quiet space. "You saw what they just did to me. Brooke abandoned me. Her father is going to ruin my reputation in the financial sector. I have absolutely nothing left. You are a chief executive officer. You have millions of dollars in liquid assets. You can pay off the stolen corporate funds right now. You can clear the mortgage debt you bought. Please, Sienna, just write a check and make this entire nightmare go away. I promise you I will change. I swear I will be a better brother. I will make it up to you and Mom and Dad for the rest of my natural life." I did not raise my voice. I did not scream, and I certainly did not shed a single tear for his self-inflicted misery. I looked down at him with ice-cold surgical clarity. "Do not make promises you do not have the basic character to keep," I stated, my voice dangerously even and devoid of any sisterly warmth. "You do not want to be a better brother, Darius. You just want a wealthy bailout. You looked at my success and immediately viewed me as an automated teller machine to fund your criminal mistakes." Darius shook his head frantically, reaching one sweaty hand out toward the hem of my pristine linen trousers. "No, Sienna, I mean it. We are family. We have to stick together when things get bad." I took a deliberate step backward, completely out of his physical reach. "We are not a family, Darius. A family protects each other. You spent the last decade throwing me and our parents directly under the bus, the absolute second you thought it would score you points with elitist social climbers. You sat in an airport lounge and watched Susan hand your father a $50 bill like he was a beggar. You listened to her hurl racist microaggressions at the woman who scrubbed toilets to pay for your fraternity dues, and you did not say a single word in their defense. You nodded along. You agreed with them. You agreed that we were too embarrassing, too poor, and too black to sit at your luxury wedding reception." My mother let out a soft, broken exhale behind me, but she did not step forward to comfort him. My father stood tall, his jaw tightly clenched, radiating a quiet, devastating disappointment that hit Darius harder than any physical blow could. "I was just trying to secure a future," Darius pleaded, his face flushed with shame. "I was trying to build generational wealth for all of us. You were building a prison of debt based entirely on a lie." I corrected him sharply, refusing to let him control the narrative. "You committed elder financial abuse against the people who gave you life. You forged our father's signature to steal equity from his home. You embezzled corporate funds to buy white orchids and imported champagne for people who discarded you the exact second your credit cards declined. You are a fraud, Darius. And now, you are going to pay the ultimate price for your arrogance." Darius sobbed openly, now dropping his head toward the floor. "Sienna, please, I cannot go to a federal prison. I will not survive there. I will do whatever you want. I will give you anything you ask for." "I already have everything I want," I replied smoothly. "But I will offer you one final non-negotiable ultimatum." Darius snapped his head up, a desperate, pathetic glimmer of hope flashing in his wet eyes. "Anything," he gasped. "Tell me what I have to do." I looked him dead in the eye, my expression hardening into an unbreakable mask of corporate and legal authority. "I will contact the authorities in Atlanta and drop the elder financial abuse charges regarding the forged power of attorney," I announced, watching his shoulders instantly drop with relief. "But in exchange, you will sign a legally binding, irrevocable contract drafted by my corporate attorneys. You will permanently relinquish all legal and financial ties to our parents. You will surrender any future claims to their estate, their healthcare directives, and their personal assets. You will never attempt to contact them again." He quickly, desperately nodded. The heavy tinted glass doors of the luxury resort slid shut behind them with a definitive, unforgiving click. The transition from the perfectly climate-controlled lobby to the sweltering oppressive Hawaiian heat was instantaneous and brutal. Brooke Darius. Susan and Charles stood on the sun-baked concrete of the valet drop-off lane, surrounded by their ridiculous mountain of oversized designer luggage. Two massive security guards planted themselves directly in front of the entrance, crossing their muscular arms to ensure the disgraced wedding party did not attempt to re-enter the property. The harsh tropical sun beat down on their faces, completely melting away the last remaining traces of their high society facade. Charles ripped off his expensive silk tie, throwing it furiously onto the pavement as he gasped for the humid air. He pulled out his smartphone, frantically checking the corporate news feeds and social media platforms. The humiliating footage of their violent eviction from the resort was already circulating online, spreading rapidly through their elite business networks. The absolute destruction of the Vanguard technology brand was happening in real time, and Charles knew he had to flee the scene immediately before any local reporters arrived. He aggressively waved his arms, flagging down a battered yellow local taxi that was idling near the edge of the circular driveway. The beat-up vehicle was a massive, embarrassing downgrade from the sleek black car service they had demanded upon arrival, but Charles did not care about aesthetics anymore. He only cared about sheer survival. "Susan, grab your bags right now." Charles barked, his voice rough and panicked. "We are going to find a cheap off-the-grid motel on the other side of the island. I need to get on a secure conference call with the board of directors before the stock price completely tanks tomorrow morning." Brooke stumbled forward, her high heels scraping clumsily against the hot asphalt. She reached out with trembling hands, desperately trying to grab her mother's arm. "Mom, wait. You cannot leave me here on the curb with all these bags. Tell the taxi driver to pop the trunk so I can load my suitcases. We have to figure out a plan together." Susan violently yanked her arm away from her daughter's grasp, looking at Brooke with an expression of sheer, unadulterated disgust. The maternal warmth was completely eradicated, replaced by the cold, calculating instinct of a social climber trying to save her own sinking ship. "There is no we anymore, Brooke," Susan snarled, her voice dripping with absolute venom. "You stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from your father's company. You tied our prestigious family name to a pathetic broke criminal who committed mortgage fraud. You humiliated us in front of our most important corporate partners. You made this disgusting criminal bed, and now you have to lie in it completely by yourself. Do not call my phone. Do not look for us." Charles shoved two large suitcases into the trunk of the rusted taxi, slamming it shut with a loud bang. He opened the passenger door for Susan, completely ignoring his sobbing daughter. "You are entirely on your own, Brooke," Charles stated ruthlessly. "Consider yourself permanently disowned from this family and immediately terminated from the Vanguard enterprise." The taxi driver slammed his foot on the accelerator, speeding away from the luxury resort and leaving a thick cloud of gray exhaust fumes in his wake. Brooke stood on the blistering pavement, completely paralyzed by the reality of her total abandonment. She was officially unemployed, entirely broke, and facing severe federal embezzlement charges. She slowly turned her head, looking at the only person left standing beside her on the sweltering curb. Her elitist arrogance was entirely broken. She was no longer the demanding, powerful bride. She was a terrified, dependent parasite searching for a new host. Brooke lunged toward Darius, grabbing his sweat-soaked shirt with a desperate, clawing grip. "Darius, you have to fix this right now," Brooke shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. "My parents just left me. I have no credit cards. I have no money for a hotel room. You are a wealth manager. You have to know some kind of loophole. Call one of your rich fraternity brothers. Call a private investor. Do something to get us out of this horrible nightmare before the local police show up and arrest me." Darius stared at her sobbing, pathetic face, realizing the absolute terrifying emptiness of his own situation. He had absolutely nothing left to his name. He possessed no hidden wealth, no secret offshore accounts, and no powerful friends who would ever answer his calls again. The wealthy woman he had sold his soul to impress was completely useless to him now. In a final pathetic act of emotional regression, Darius shoved Brooke away. He completely ignored her whining, terrified cries, and spun around to face the luxury resort. He marched directly toward the heavy glass doors, slamming his fists aggressively against the thick, transparent panes. The security guards immediately stepped forward, placing their hands firmly on their batons, preparing to physically tackle him to the concrete. "Mom!" Darius screamed at the top of his lungs, pressing his sweaty face against the hot glass. "Mom, please come out here. I am your son. I need you. Mom, please do not let Sienna do this to me. You have to make her stop. I need my family. Please, Mom, I am begging you." He wailed like a helpless, frightened child, desperately trying to manipulate the maternal bond he had viciously exploited his entire life. The security guards moved in to forcefully drag him away from the property line. Suddenly, the automatic glass doors slid open with a quiet hum. A rush of cool air-conditioned air swept out over the sweltering pavement. Evelyn and Thomas stepped out onto the sun-baked concrete. They stopped at the curb, looking down at the pathetic, sweating, sobbing mess of a son they had sacrificed everything for. Darius lifted his tear-stained face toward the sliding glass doors, his chest heaving with desperate, jagged breaths. He reached his shaking hands out toward our mother, expecting the familiar, comforting rescue he had relied on his entire life. Whenever he failed a class, wrecked a car, or drowned in credit card debt, Evelyn had always been the ultimate safety net. He looked at her standing on the sun-baked Hawaiian pavement and immediately deployed the practiced, pathetic whimper of a little boy who had just scraped his knee. "Mom, you have to help me right now," Darius pleaded. "You have the emergency savings account. You can cash out your retirement fund. Just wire the money to the resort so I can stop the police from coming. Please, Mom, you are the only one who can fix this disaster." He waited for her to rush forward, to drop to her knees, and pull him into a warm, forgiving embrace. He expected her to immediately pull out her phone and drain her bank account to shield her golden boy from the consequences of his own actions. But Evelyn did not move a single inch. She did not reach out. She did not shed a single tear. She stood tall in the beautiful emerald green resort dress I had purchased for her, radiating an unbreakable, majestic dignity. My father stood firmly by her side, a silent, immovable fortress of support. Evelyn looked down at the sweating, sniveling man, groveling on the concrete, and then she slowly shifted her gaze to the ruined, mascara-stained woman trembling beside him. "I read the message in the group chat, Darius," Evelyn stated, her voice remarkably calm, but carrying a lethal, terrifying weight that commanded absolute silence. "I read the exact message where your fiancé told me that if I wanted to attend my own son's wedding, I should swim across the Pacific Ocean." Darius flinched, opening his mouth to formulate a frantic excuse, but Evelyn raised a single authoritative hand, instantly shutting him down. "I sat in my dark dining room staring at that screen." Evelyn continued her words, slicing through the heavy tropical humidity. "I waited for you to reply. I waited for the boy I carried in my womb for 9 months to defend his mother. I waited for you to tell this arrogant, racist woman that nobody speaks to your family that way. But you said absolutely nothing. You let her humiliate us, and then you called your father to tell him that we were simply too poor and too unpolished to sit in the same room as her elite country club friends." Darius swallowed hard, fresh sweat pouring down his temples. "Mom, Brooke was just stressed about the corporate budget. I was trying to protect you from feeling uncomfortable around her parents." Evelyn let out a harsh, echoing laugh that contained absolutely zero humor. "Protect me? You thought you needed to protect me from feeling uncomfortable." Evelyn took a slow, deliberate step forward, her eyes blazing with decades of unappreciated sacrifice. "I worked 3 consecutive janitorial shifts for 4 years. I scrubbed the filthy toilets of corporate executives who looked right through me. I worked until the cartilage in my knees completely deteriorated, all so I could pay your ridiculous fraternity dues. I swallowed my pride every single day so you could wear tailored suits and pretend you were born into generational wealth. And you repaid my blood and sweat by allowing a mediocre, thieving woman to treat me like a stray dog on the street." Brooke let out a quiet whimper, physically shrinking away from my mother's burning gaze. Evelyn turned her attention directly to the disgraced bride. "You looked at my black family, and you saw a disease you needed to eradicate from your perfect white wedding," Evelyn said smoothly, dissecting Brooke with surgical precision. "You thought you were superior because you had a fancy corporate title and a stolen credit card. But look at you right now. Your own parents threw you out like garbage and fled in a cheap taxi. My daughter owns the very ground you are standing on today. Evelyn turned her focus back to Darius, preparing to deliver the ultimate crushing blow. Sienna showed me the financial documents yesterday. Evelyn revealed, watching her son's eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated terror. She showed me the secondary mortgage paperwork. You forged your father's signature. You took the only piece of genuine wealth we ever managed to build. You took the family home where you took your very first steps, and you secretly handed it over to a bank just to buy imported caviar and white orchids for a woman who despises your blood. Mom, I was going to pay it back. Darius sobbed violently, clutching his chest. I was going to use my year-end bonus to clear the debt. I never meant to leave you homeless. You were willing to let us die in the street just to impress people who hate you. Evelyn stated, her voice dropping to a harsh, unforgiving whisper. You hated your own background so much that you sold your soul to escape it. You want my retirement savings now? You want the money I scraped together while you were drinking $500 champagne? I do not have a single penny for you. Darius let out a loud, agonizing wail, reaching his hands out toward her designer dress. Mom, please do not abandon me. I am your son. Evelyn looked down at him for the very last time, her expression completely wiped clean of any maternal affection. I spent my entire life trying to protect you from the harshness of the world, Evelyn said with ice-cold finality. I never realized I needed to protect myself from you. You are dead to me. Evelyn turned her back-linked arms with Thomas and walked gracefully right back through the sliding glass doors into the luxurious resort, leaving him completely shattered on the pavement outside. Darius remained kneeling on the scorching concrete, his chest heaving as he stared at the sliding glass doors that had just closed behind his parents. The absolute finality of his mother's rejection hung heavily in the thick, humid air. He had spent his entire life manipulating her unconditional love, treating her sacrifices as stepping stones for his own arrogant ambitions. Now the safety net was permanently gone. He slowly turned his head to look at Brooke, the woman he had destroyed his own family to impress. She was pacing frantically near their massive pile of designer luggage, aggressively biting her perfectly manicured fingernails. Her high society facade had completely melted away, leaving behind a terrified, cornered animal. She kept muttering to herself, frantically trying to formulate a new survival strategy. Neither of them noticed the distant, piercing, high-pitched wail of sirens cutting through the serene sounds of beautiful, crashing ocean waves. The piercing sound grew rapidly louder, echoing violently down the pristine, palm tree-lined coastal highway. The few remaining wedding guests who had lingered near the valet stand began to murmur, stepping back toward the safety of the lobby entrance. Brooke froze, her eyes darting wildly toward the main gate of the property. Two local Maui police cruisers roared up the sweeping driveway, their bright red and blue emergency lights violently flashing against the polished exterior of the luxury resort. The vehicles skidded to a sudden, aggressive halt right next to the valet drop-off lane, completely blocking the exit path. The heavy car doors swung open simultaneously. Four heavily armed, uniformed police officers stepped out onto the pavement. Their expressions were stern, professional, and entirely devoid of the welcoming island hospitality the resort usually provided to its wealthy elite corporate visitors. The lead officer, a tall man with a commanding presence, unclipped his radio from his utility belt and scanned the chaotic scene on the curb. His sharp gaze immediately locked onto the disgraced, sweating couple surrounded by their ridiculous mountain of expensive suitcases. The officer marched directly toward them, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. He did not ask for the resort manager. He did not ask for the concierge. He walked straight up to the weeping, mascara-stained bride and the defeated, kneeling groom. He asked them to formally identify themselves. Brooke instinctively took a step backward, aggressively shaking her head, as if she could magically deny her own miserable existence. Darius remained on his knees, his jaw trembling so violently he could barely speak his own full name out loud. I watched the entire scene unfold from the cool, air-conditioned comfort just inside the glass doors, taking a slow sip of my iced mojito. I knew exactly why the police had arrived with such aggressive speed. When I finalized the comprehensive corporate audit for Vanguard Technology earlier that week, I did not just submit the paperwork to their internal board of directors. As a licensed sworn financial compliance officer, I was legally obligated to report massive, systemic embezzlement to the proper federal authorities. My audit had triggered an automatic high-priority federal alert for severe wire fraud occurring across multiple state lines. Brooke had used digital banking networks to move stolen corporate funds from the mainland to Hawaii. Darius had used federal telecommunications to commit severe mortgage fraud. The local Hawaiian authorities had simply received the active expedited federal warrants directly from the mainland. The lead officer pulled a folded document from his chest pocket. He looked directly at Brooke, his voice booming across the quiet driveway. He officially informed her that she was being detained under suspicion of felony corporate embezzlement and interstate wire fraud. He then turned his steely gaze down to Darius, informing my brother that he was facing matching charges for extreme financial conspiracy and elder financial abuse. The sheer weight of the formal, terrifying legal terms completely shattered the last remaining fragments of their arrogant delusions. This was not a minor corporate misunderstanding. This was not a simple family argument that could be smoothed over with a fake apology. This was the absolute destruction of their entire freedom. Brooke let out a blood-curdling, hysterical shriek. The wealthy, entitled woman who had smugly told my hardworking parents to swim across the Pacific Ocean was now thrashing her arms wildly in the air. She aggressively pointed a shaking finger right at Darius. She screamed at the top of her lungs, violently claiming that she was completely innocent. She shouted that Darius was a manipulative mastermind who had tricked her into routing the company money. She cried to the officers, begging them to call her father, swearing that she was a victim of his toxic working-class family. Darius scrambled up from the hot pavement, his own survival instincts kicking in. He pointed right back at his screaming bride, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. He yelled that Brooke had forced him to steal the cash. He screamed that she had threatened to cancel the wedding and humiliate him if he did not produce massive sums of money to pay for her extravagant demands. The two of them stood there in the blistering tropical heat, viciously tearing each other apart. The perfect, elite couple was now ruthlessly throwing each other directly to the wolves, proving they possessed absolutely zero true loyalty. The police officers were entirely unbothered by their pathetic screaming and vicious blame game. The lead officer stepped forward, grabbing Brooke firmly by her wrist and twisting her arm behind her back. The sharp, terrifying click of heavy metal handcuffs, snapping tightly around her wrists, echoed loudly. A second officer grabbed Darius, pinning his arms behind his ruined designer suit jacket and locking another set of cold steel cuffs around his shaking wrists without hesitation. The ultimate consequence arrived. Both the golden boy and the arrogant sister-in-law are handcuffed and shoved into the back of the squad cars, their screaming echoing down the resort driveway. The wail of the police sirens faded into the distance, taking the toxic chaos of my brother and his arrogant bride away forever. The heavy tension that had gripped our family for a decade evaporated into the warm Hawaiian breeze. The scene shifted from the humiliating resort driveway to a pristine oceanfront cabana on the secluded side of the island. The turquoise water of the Pacific Ocean stretched out before us, sparkling under the late afternoon sun. Gentle waves lapped against the white sand, creating a soothing soundtrack that replaced the hysterical screaming we had just left behind. I sat comfortably on a plush lounge chair, dressed in a flowing silk sundress that caught the ocean breeze. My mother, Evelyn, reclined on the sofa next to me, holding a glass of fresh guava juice. My father, Thomas, stood near the edge of the wooden deck, staring out at the breathtaking horizon, with a relaxed posture I had not seen in years. The heavy cloud of manipulation, financial abuse, and racist degradation had been eradicated from our lives. We were experiencing the overwhelming peace of finally excising a malignant tumor from our family tree. Evelyn took a slow sip of drink, closing her eyes as the tropical sun warmed her face. She let out a deep sigh, a sound completely stripped of the chronic anxiety she used to carry. "I thought I would feel heartbroken," Evelyn said, her voice steady and remarkably clear. "I spent my entire adult life terrified of failing my son. I thought that if I did not sacrifice every single piece of my own happiness, I was somehow a bad mother. But sitting here now, I do not feel an ounce of sorrow for him. He made his choices. He chose to look down on the people who gave him everything. He chose to steal our future to buy his way into a family of arrogant thieves. I finally feel like I can breathe again. I reached across the small wicker table and squeezed her hand. You did not fail him, Mom. You gave him every tool to succeed in this world. He chose to use those tools to dig his own grave. You and Dad deserve to spend the rest of your lives enjoying the fruits of your own labor without constantly checking your bank accounts to see what new disaster he created. Thomas turned away from the ocean and walked back toward the shaded seating area. The deep wrinkles that usually framed his tired eyes seemed to have completely smoothed out. He walked over to the small cabana bar, picked up a chilled bottle of vintage champagne, and expertly popped the cork. He poured 3 generous glasses of the sparkling wine, handing one to my mother and one to me. My father stood tall, holding his crystal flute up toward the wooden ceiling of the cabana. He looked directly into my eyes, and for the very first time in my 33 years of life, I saw nothing but pure, unadulterated awe and respect shining back at me. I need to say something, Sienna. Thomas began, his voice thick with a heavy, deeply rooted emotion. For years, your mother and I poured all our energy, all our resources, and all our blind hope into your brother. We assumed he was the one who was going to carry our family name into a better, wealthier world. We were completely blinded by his tailored suits and his fancy corporate job titles. We took your quiet strength for granted. We assumed your independence meant you did not need us, so we focused all our attention on the child who constantly demanded it. He paused, his eyes welling with proud tears that he did not bother trying to hide. But you are the one who actually built an empire. Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger, echoing with absolute conviction. You built a massive, powerful company from the ground up with absolutely no help from us. You faced down powerful, wealthy executives who tried to intimidate you, and you completely crushed them. I bought the debt on our home to protect us from being thrown out into the street. You saved our lives, Sienna. You are a brilliant, terrifyingly powerful woman, and I am so incredibly proud to be your father. I am so sorry it took a catastrophic betrayal for me to finally open my eyes and see the absolute force of nature you have become. A warm, glowing feeling bloomed inside my chest, far more satisfying than the adrenaline rush of the corporate revenge I had just executed. This was the exact validation I had quietly craved my entire life. I did not need Brooke's elitist country club approval. I did not need my brother's fake high society acceptance. I just needed my parents to finally see my worth. Thank you, Dad, I replied softly, raising my glass to meet his. That means the world to me, to our family, the real one. To our family. Evelyn echoed, a radiant, beautiful smile transforming her face as our crystal glasses clinked together in perfect harmony. I turned my gaze back toward the vast, glittering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The tropical sun was just beginning its descent, painting the horizon in spectacular fiery shades of orange, pink, and vibrant purple. The rhythmic, soothing sound of the waves crashing against the pristine shoreline felt like a natural applause, honoring our newfound freedom. The bitter memories of being treated as an invisible secondary citizen melted away, completely washed away by the sea breeze. I watched the golden light dance beautifully across the gentle water, feeling a truly overwhelming sense of total closure. My heart was no longer burdened by the exhausting weight of seeking validation from toxic people who simply refused to see my value. I smiled at the sunset, knowing that sweet revenge isn't just about destroying your enemies, it's about